Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, Headliner Nation. Hopefully the vibes are well out there today. Your boy Kyle back with the fantasy headliners to talk some more fantasy football, specifically the consensus rankings. Way too early in the offseason to really take any rankings seriously. And we've talked about that a little bit right now, kind of doing this series on videos, talking about the consensus rankings at each position, some things that I see that maybe just don't make a whole lot of sense, or that I think may be right, or things that could change. We're going to be going over all of that today when it comes to the tight end position. But really kind of last week on our Sunday night members only live stream, really talked with our members a little bit about, this time of the year for these rankings that are being submitted all over the place. It really feels like people try to do things this time of the year just to start conversations. And I don't like that. I'm not a big fan of it, but it is what it is. Some people out there are just doing this for the attention. We don't do that here, Headliner Nation. We want to prepare you all for a really, really good season. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Let's talk about the consensus rankings a little bit and what it will mean for you possibly come draft day. And talking about the tight ends, we are going to start with Kyle Pitts and Darren Waller. Both of these guys right now with their respective rankings are a little bit too high for me. Now, maybe you might be a little bit shocked that when Darren Waller comes in at tight end 5 that I've actually got him a little too high at that point. We'll talk about that in a second. But Kyle Pitts had a fantastic year last year outside of scoring touchdowns, right? The most receiving yards ever for a rookie tight end. A fabulous season with over 1,000 yards, but he didn't do anything in the touchdown department, right? That was really where his validity all season long took a hit because of that. And we talked about that on a consistent basis last year when people were like, "Oh, I hate Kyle Pitts and I can't believe all these things." I kept trying to remind people over and over, hey, he's just not scoring touchdowns. If he does score touchdowns, it's going to be great, but there's no upside without those touchdowns. Now, it was one of the reasons why I was a little bit lower on him to start. And now this year, he doesn't get an opportunity to be that mismatch, right? One of the things that makes Kyle Pitts so good is that he is a tight end that's really playing kind of a slot wide receiver role, which, yes, can be a mismatch, but the problem is Atlanta doesn't really have anybody to help out as a main pass-catching weapon. And that's not good for Kyle Pitts, because even though there is the potential for a mismatch there, he's still going to be the focal point of that offense. Teams are going to keep an eye on him and treat him as kind of being that number one target, number one pass catcher. Cordero Patterson, maybe he goes back out to wide receiver a little bit more. We'll have to see what happens with that. But right now you've got Auden Tate, Demiria Bird, Olamide Zaccheaus. I mean, there isn't a whole lot there that really screams, yay! And on top of that, you don't have Matt Ryan as your quarterback anymore. And yes, Matt Ryan gets his fair share of criticism, but you're going from Matt Ryan to Marcus Mariota. If you didn't love Matt Ryan, I don't know how you love Marcus Mariota. Now, nothing against Mariota, but he's just not the same player that Matt Ryan was there in Atlanta. So now you've got a new quarterback. You're the main pass-catching weapon. To expect to really be that guy in the red zone this year and to get all that volume, to me, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There are some options that I feel like maybe just have a bit more upside than what he does. Darren Waller for me is a concern. Now, I wouldn't drop him too far down, but we have to realize that the reason Darren Waller has been such a great fantasy producer the last couple of years, and I'm a huge Darren Waller fan, okay? Huge Darren Waller fan, but a reason he has been so good the last couple of years is because of the amount of volume he has gotten. He has been the guy the last couple of years, who has been the main pass catcher there, really, honestly, for the last 3 years. Really had that breakout season in 2019 where he had 117 targets and 90 receptions and went over 1,100 yards. And then he backed all of that up in 2020 with 145 targets, 107 reception yards, 107 receptions, 1,196 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns. And then took a pretty big step back last year with only 93 targets, 55 receptions, 665 yards. So his yards per reception was still pretty consistent, but his receptions per game dropped almost a full reception, and his yards per game dropped from the year before almost 15 yards per reception. So or per game, excuse me, yards per game. So this is the problem with Darren Waller, a guy that really has lifted off a whole lot of volume the last couple of years. Now has a guy there, breakout candidate last season. Hunter Renfrow was really the guy down the stretch for them and did a great job. So now you've got Hunter Renfrow kind of coming into his second year of being a true pass catching weapon in that offense. On top of that, you've added Devontae Adams, probably still going to run the football a little bit with Josh Jacobs. So for me, when I take a look at this, Darren Waller's volume just doesn't seem to be as big of an option this year as it has been in years past. So for me, Darren Waller takes a little bit of a step back, and now instead of talking about a top 5 tight end, we're talking about, yeah, he's definitely a top 10 tight end, but he's going to have some vulnerable weeks. Now, another guy that I would move down and then a guy that I would move up, TJ Hockenson and Dallas Goedert, if you want to be fancy with it. If not, Dallas Goedert. TJ Hockenson for me at tight end 6 will end up dropping a little bit. Now, some of this has to do with, do they add any more pass catchers? Possibly. If they don't, tight end 6 could end up being right in that area. All right, but there's a little bit of talk about Debo potentially going there. There's some talk about maybe some round 2 wide receivers, really trying to add some guys. You re-sign Josh Reynolds, who Jared Goff has a connection with. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a big end to the 2021 season. Does that continue to keep up? DeAndre Swift, if he can stay healthy, do they get him utilized in the passing game a little bit more? So for TJ Hockenson, for me, just because their last year was some of those up and down performances, and yes, the targets were there at times, but then they would kind of disappear for a game or two. For me with TJ Hockenson, just because of the possibility of another weapon coming in and what we see really in terms of carrying over from last year, to me, he's still a guy that I'm going to lock into the top 10 because of his skill set. But he's not a guy that is going to become that top performer. I don't think he's a guy now at this point where we see him become a guy where, hey, he's putting up close to 100 yards a game. We're getting him double-digit targets. It's going to happen sometimes, but I think a lot of it is going to depend on the game plan and who they're playing. And when it becomes that dependent, that's not something that rivals like a Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews. Those are guys that are going to be getting their targets no matter what. George Kittle even. So where TJ Hockenson, for me, it's just a little bit of, what can we really expect this year? Now, a guy that I want to move up a little bit is going to be Dallas Goedert from the Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas Goedert, for me, is a huge breakout candidate this year, and really, honestly, one of my favorite tight end targets this year. You all know me here, the tight end whisperer. I definitely love to really nail in that one tight end every single year that I think is going to have a huge season. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas Goedert season. Oh, man. This will be his first full season without Zach Ertz also there. So he's going to be the guy this season. And last year, really throughout, a majority of the season, was the main pass catching weapon. Even though Devontae Smith still had a pretty decent year, Dallas Goedert last year, especially after he didn't play in week 6, but after he came back in week 6, we really saw those targets start to tick up a little bit. To begin the year, he was kind of 5.2, 4.53, kind of in that area. Well, after he comes back in week 6, starting in week 7, he goes 5.76, had a bad week with 2, then 8.3, 6.9, 4.7, didn't play in week 18, 12 targets in their first round loss to Tampa Bay. And his receiving yards were up as well. I mean, after he came back in week 7, he had 3 games over 70 yards and he had 2 games over 100 yards. One thing that we just want to see a little bit more of, only 4 touchdowns. But again, he is a guy this year that Jalen Hurts, I think, is going to rely on an awful lot. That he's really going to be sticking to him and watching him throughout the year. Now, another thing to keep in mind, and two, from what we've seen in Dallas Goedert in the past, like last season in weeks 1 through 5, when Zach Ertz was still there, the percentage of offensive snaps that he played was 73, 66, 59, 74, 67. Again, he didn't play in week 6. From week 7 on, 93, 68, 93. He got hurt in week 10, didn't play the whole game, 20, but then to end the season, 96, 96, 96, 93, 84, 93, and then 89% in their playoff game. He's on the field all the time. If you've got a tight end that is finding his way onto the field more than 90% of the time, more than 80% of the time, the bet is that more than likely he is going to end up seeing a fair amount of targets. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dallas Goedert, I really think, is in for a big year. I think he's going to be that safety valve for Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, a guy that's been very inconsistent so far as a quarterback in the league, is going to need somebody. And I think that could end up being Dallas Goedert. Even if they add another pass-catching weapon, I think that I still think that Dallas Goedert is a guy that sees more than his fair share of targets. How in the world is a guy that finished as the tight end 3 last year being ranked as the tight end 8 this year, and he has a better situation? This is why I hate rankings. Dalton Schultz coming in at tight end 8 right now is absolutely, incredibly, ridiculously stupid. I'm just going to be honest with you, Headliner Nation. Dalton Schultz should not be the tight end 8. He was the tight end 3 in half PPR at the end of last year, and they lost Amari Cooper. Are you telling me that you really think that Dalton Schultz isn't going to see a better season this year, or at least comparable to what he saw last year? Get out of town, ladies and gentlemen. In 17 games last year, Schultz had 104 targets, 78 receptions, 808 yards, and 8 touchdowns. To begin this season, yes, they will have CeeDee Lamb. Yes, they will have Tony Pollard. Yes, they will have Ezekiel Elliott. But what they won't have, possibly is Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup might not be fully healthy to begin the year. We'll keep an eye on that to see when he actually makes it back. On top of that, what is the rest of the depth chart going to look like after we get out of the draft? James Washington was brought into Dallas, but it's James Washington. It's not really anything that we need to write home about. Dalton Schultz is Dak Prescott's guy. Dalton Schultz is Dak Prescott's guy. That's it. That's all there is to it at this point. Those two have an absolutely great chemistry. Now that Amari Cooper is gone and CeeDee Lamb is really the wide receiver 1, I would make an argument that what we've seen out of Dak Prescott and Dalton Schultz has been a little bit more promising than Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. He's going to be a great target. This is going to be an improved, hopefully, NFC East. That defense on Dallas may be a little bit less than what we saw last year in terms of how good they play. That could lead to have to throw the ball a little bit more. Dalton Schultz at tight end 3 is absolutely, or tight end 8 is absolutely ridiculous to me. I cannot believe that he isn't any higher than that. Zach Ertz at tight end 12. I definitely like Zach Ertz this year as well. I think that this is going to be a really great opportunity for him to be one of the main pass catchers there. Yes, you have DeAndre Hopkins and Rondale Moore still, but with Zach Ertz, he could really kind of slot in as that number 2 target to Kyler Murray in front of Rondale Moore this year. Now, there's still time this offseason. They could end up bringing somebody else in. They could end up drafting somebody. But as of right now, for me, Zach Ertz is really that number 2 guy behind DeAndre Hopkins, who, by the way, has had issues staying healthy recently. So that could also end up working in his favor. So for me, taking a look at these two guys that are really being ranked in the back half of tight end ones, they're more mid tight end ones than anything at this point. I would take both of these guys, honestly, over Kyle Pitts right now. I would take both of these guys, honestly, over TJ Hockenson right now. It's just one of those things where I think their opportunity is going to be a little bit better. I like Kyle Pitts. Great talent. I don't know if he can do it as the guy, is really the only guy there. For TJ Hockenson, the inconsistencies I talked about, can he figure those out? Can he get some of those inconsistencies taken care of? Now, in terms of taking both of these guys over Darren Waller, I don't know if I would do that quite yet. If you were twisting my arm and you said, Kyle, you've got to choose, I probably would take Schultz over Darren Waller as of this moment, and Darren Waller over Zach Ertz. But again, we've got a lot of time to still play out this offseason. We still have the draft to happen. There's still some guys that could end up signing that would impact all of the guys that are listed here, and that would impact our rankings as well. We will do some post-draft rankings just to kind of go over like where guys landed and what the outcome is for a lot of these players. But man, some of these like really early rankings right now are just super confusing to me because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my mind that we're not really looking at guys that had a good season last year and then rewarding them for that, plus identifying the fact that that season could be replicated because maybe their situations are, if not at least the same, better. So you have to take all those things into account. And unfortunately, I think this time of the year, there's just a whole lot of people ranking based on names, or again, really just trying to start some sort of dialogue back and forth and get some clickbaitish words for their articles that they're going to be posting. So let me know down in the comments below, though, who is a tight end that you're taking your shot on? And what do you think about the guys that I listed here? Is there anybody that maybe you think a little bit differently on? You think higher, lower, whatever it may be? Let me know down in the comments. Now, if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, well, I'm going to have to get you right below here to hit that subscribe button, stick around, and then also hit the like button for me if you appreciate the content. Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here. Appreciate you all. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on third down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation. I'm a headliner.